Hello, my name is Veronica, and I am so excited to have Belinda Ngassa.
Yes,
Did I get
hello.
it?
Yeah, you got it. Good to be
So,
here. Thanks for having me.
yeah, I'm happy to have you. So Belinda and I were both living in Bali, and we met in Bali, and
hmm
she's from London, and she's a transformational coach, and she coaches conscious entrepreneurs. So today we're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna be in flow. We're gonna talk about what it's like being a coach, what it's like being a woman of color in the spiritual community, in the conscious community, what it's like being a woman of color and a coach. And we're just gonna talk about vulnerability, why it's important, why vulnerability is important right now, why having uncomfortable, authentic, and honest conversations are important right now, especially right now. So, also, something that I wanted to mention is, if you're watching this video, some things might come up and you might feel uncomfortable. You might get triggered by something that I say, something that Belinda says. And, if that happens, I invite you to lean into it and know that neither one of us are perfect. And this is why we are, talking and doing what we do, because we are human beings and we're just having conversations and, being with what comes up. So I just thought that was important to share. So Belinda, tell me who you are, what you're doing, what you're up to, why you're
Sure. So, yeah. The whole spiel. I'm Belinda, conscious entrepreneurs online called the Hive Academy. My brand is Be Holy Living, and under that, I work with conscious entrepreneurs on building purpose-led businesses. I work with corporations and companies on creating safe spaces for their employees to bring their authentic selves to the workplace. And I also run kind of academy events and helping people to understand the holistic nature of health and wellness and spirituality. I came in from an untraditional route, I would say, or maybe it's traditional in this field. I went from corporate management consultancy, working in the big four, very much in my masculine expression of energy, my suppressive expression of energy, just trying to fit in and do what I could do to get further along my CEO track, along my career path. And just at some point, those things just stopped resonating. I feel like I woke up and there was a point that once I was awake, I couldn't go back to sleep. So none of the things that I was chasing were actually giving me the joy or happiness or fulfillment. At the end, there wasn't that kind of fulfilling, deep in your gut feeling that, wow, I'm on the right path. And so I went and carved my own path, which brought me here to Bali, which had me in Hawaii for a while, working in Jamaica and Barbados with my best friend, and tons of adventures that we can get into. But yeah, that's what brings me here to Bali, in a place that is very spiritually charged and allows for me to really sit into my full expression and build my business consciously the way that I coach others to.
Beautiful. And we both decided to stay here during COVID.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we rushed here actually. We were like,
here.
yeah, let's leave.
Yeah. So what is it like being a entrepreneur, being a coach for conscious entrepreneurs? Like, what does it do for you? What was your journey getting there? Like, what was that thing that got you so sick and tired of what you were doing in corporate that you were like, I'm going to do this for other people and do this on my own?
Good question. I feel like for a long time I was on my personal development path and I was two different people. I was one person in my personal life and I was one person at work. And before I started on my personal development path, those two people were the same. You know, the person that I was in my personal life, I showed up to at work, and I suppressed and repressed a lot of me, a lot of my energy. But as I began to unlock and discover the parts of me that I just disassociated from for so long, they didn't fit in my work construct. Work wouldn't allow me to shift, to change, to transform, and to grow. And so I was coming up against a lot of blockers when I was seeing injustice or inequality in the workplace, when it came to women, when it came to people of color, when it came to even men that didn't just fit the typical, what we call lad in the UK, the lad kind of hustle hard, party hard vibe. Because I had a lot of friends that were men but didn't fit that construct and also experienced inequality. The more that I saw that, and the more that it just bumped against my values and my beliefs, the more I got the courage to I need to start looking at what I could do that aligns more to me, what aligns more to my values. And so I didn't actually just go from corporate into coaching and into building an academy. My middle step was building my own consulting agency. So I built a business because I thought, okay, this is my grand goal. I want to be a coach. I want to help others build their businesses. First of all, I wanted the experience of building my own business, of building it to 6 figures a year, of finding clients, of hitting my goals and being strategic. And so that's what I did. So when I quit my 9 to 5, I built an agency, consulting agency with other clients, and I aligned it to my beliefs and values. So it was almost that middle ground where I could instill my value of freedom and be like, in my contracts, I work remote, and just stipulate that as a condition, and my values around variety. So if I didn't like or resonate with a client, I could leave that, find another one, and so on. And it helped me learn about business in general, what it means to be a business owner. But again, after a while, also stopped resonating, because the bits that I liked the most were looking after people that were working for me, or looking after and building relationships with my clients, and leading workshops with my clients, and allowing this authentic expression in the workplace within project teams. And so that's when I made this final switch into conscious entrepreneurship. And that's really what I help business owners do today. Those who have found massive success on their own, either through a career path that's being drawn for them, or in entrepreneurship, but it's just not aligning to who they are inside and where their personal development and growth has taken them. So conscious entrepreneurship for me, it's just that perfect sweet spot, because you get people who are so motivated by their vision, by their dreams, by their goals. They're very self-motivated, they're doers, they've probably lived in that construct for a long time. And I love being able to free them from the shadow masculine of I must control, I must meet targets, I must do this, to, oh my gosh, I'm actually made to do this. And now that I'm stepping into this flow state, I'm attracting clients, and I'm just being visible and having people come to me, as opposed to feeling like I have to chase the next contract and chase the next client. So that's why I do it, because I love that shift in mindset and that shift in belief that comes when you speak about conscious entrepreneurship.
I really love that. It sounds like you had like a whole amazing journey, and that you had to face some dark demons and things to get you to be where you are today, and even to really step into your power and step into conscious leadership. Right. So, and I heard you talk about inequality being a woman, inequality being a person of color. Do you find it harder to be a woman of color in doing what you're doing as a transformational coach? Because you and I had this conversation the other day. We talked about in the spiritual community, in the conscious community, I do see a lot of white people, including me. I see, a lot of white yoga teachers, men's groups, and a lot of them are white. And there's a ton of expats here in Bali, right? And I see a lot of white people, and I'm wondering, which is, it's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing. It's just why do you think there isn't as much diversity, or why don't we know about a lot more people of color who talk about empathy, vulnerability, coaching, conscious entrepreneurship. Like, I want to see more of that. And I want to know, I want to amplify like Black leaders, like Black voices who talk about vulnerability and empathy, because that's what I teach. And I know a lot of white people who talk about it. And before all of this, I didn't even really think about it. I've thought about it, but like I didn't really like sit down and really look at it until now. So that was a long question, but
I got it. Yeah, I think it's twofold. Part of the human experience, and what I tell people about experiencing life in a Black body, because as a spiritual community, sometimes we use the spiritual bypass of, oh, but we're all souls, but you know we're all higher power and we're united. But the reality is we have to live life in this human construct. That's part of our divine assignment. It's part of what we agreed to when we came to Earth. So we cannot completely discount the Black experience, being in the Black body. And as a Black woman, I was taught from very, very young that I had to suppress, that my expression was too much, that my expression would get me in trouble, that my expression would be read as aggressiveness, it would make people like me less. I had to come to terms with a lot of things that as a kid you actually shouldn't have to come to terms with. Even just little things, like I'll we used to laugh about this when I was younger, but my grandma would be like, women, or like, you shouldn't be laughing with your teeth whilst eating, we shouldn't be able to see your teeth whilst you're eating. And it was like this really silly thing, and we're like, oh, shut up, grandma. But the fact that that's what like Black women are taught, we're taught to just, invert and suppress because our power is too threatening, our power is too overwhelming. So there's that one barrier that you have to overcome as a transformational leader, as a person working in the spiritual sphere. You have to overcome your own limiting beliefs that were placed ancestrally on making yourself small, on making yourself acceptable, on not, bumping against societal norms, on just staying in your lane. So there's that one barrier that we have to go through. The second barrier is a cultural one, which is within our own Black community, where things like therapists and healers are seen as woo-woo. It's like, it's only just become socially acceptable to say you have a therapist, kind of, like very, very small. People, I had to speak to my mum about it because she was suggested to go to therapy, and she was like, but I'm not crazy. And I was like, Mom, it's not about, we still don't understand it. And my mum is pretty forward thinking for an African woman. There's some that would, absolutely disown people for going to therapists or listening to astrology or any of that. So we have both how we're told to behave, and also our cultural construct to break through and break free from before being able to be the leaders. So that's why I believe that there's less, because there is this lack of acceptance of full expression. So you really do have to be a rebel to be in this field. You have to renounce part of your culture and renounce part of your people and just shut some of those voices, which in a society where, the mums, so let me think, like 40, 50-year-olds know about yoga. So like if you go to the UK, like you've got the 50-year-old mums are going to yoga and they're doing meditation and they understand it. It's in their vocabulary. We're still going from first generation. We're the first generation to be very vocal about it and to be settled in it. So I think that's why you see less representation. And also we can't avoid the fact that there is a systemic prejudice and system around us that is also preventing those voices from being heard and being seen. Because yes, you can be a Black yoga teacher, but don't start talking about politics or anything. Like, stay in your lane. You can be a Black coach, but we prefer it if you act or talk white. So there's still that prejudice that is very much within our system, where you'll have people surprised at how you speak or how you express yourself, or wow, you worked at a Big Four, or, you know, all of these things that don't come as a surprise if you were to put them in a white frame. So we have a lot on our plates as far as Black leaders in the spiritual community, and even more, I would say, as women, because we have two fights going on. But two horses in this fight.
Oh, I love what you said about like that about breaking barriers to, you know, be a leader in this community. Like you have to almost take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said something about like a white frame. Can you say more about that? Like what's that to you in your experience?
Absolutely. So this is where I'll bring up the point of white privilege. And I'm glad that you prefaced this session of talking about triggers, because often we get triggered and we turn away, or we discount something, or we try and escape it, or we feel overwhelming guilt for it. Yeah. None of those things are productive. None of them. The guilt isn't productive. It's as unproductive as the turning away is, because it doesn't bring about change. Understanding brings about change. Understanding and empathy is what brings change. So when I say white privilege, if there's anyone that's feeling triggered, just keep listening. Let's keep coming with me. White privilege isn't saying that white people are privileged. It's not saying that all white people are rich. They don't have problems. They have the best jobs. It's not saying that at all. All white privilege is saying is that there is a privilege, an unearned privilege, to not have to think of yourself as other, that white people get just because you are born into a system that has classed you as highest due to the color of your skin. So yes, white people get depression. Yes, white people have eating disorders. Yes, white people get abused, but they don't get abused or get eating disorders or don't get jobs just based on the color of their skin. There are wide studies about how people employ based on a name. Based on a name, you're more likely to get on the door. So if you have a Black sounding name, you're more likely to get discounted. There's prejudice that's already put previously that you have to work through. I feel like in every work construct or corporate construct, I'm coming in to prove myself. I'm not given the benefit of the doubt. I have to bring myself up to a level where I'm able to be given the benefit of the doubt. I was even taught by my parents, you know, the first 6 months, you have to be absolutely faultless, completely faultless. Like no one can call you out on being late, can call you out on, you know, writing an email wrong. Like there is this massive pressure that you are carrying the perception of your whole race, which comes as a Black woman. So that's all privilege is. Privilege is just that, yes, white people have issues. One of them isn't the color of your skin. You're not going to get, you know, pulled over because you drive a nice car and people are going to assume that you don't own it, or they're going to ask for your papers. I've had that done. My dad's had that done. My dad is a CEO of a really big fintech company, which shouldn't even matter because he's a human being. So there's all of these things. That's what we talk about when we call white privilege. And it's not a personal attack on you, on a white person. It's just saying that the system that is built around us, that was built by our forefathers and ancestors, is broken. And we need to switch up the system. So when I speak about living in this white frame, especially in spirituality, first of all, even just hearing it, it's crazy, because spirituality is really prevalent in indigenous societies. It's really prevalent in the African community and in the Aboriginal community and Native American and the Hindu community. There's such a big amount of spirituality that has been quote unquote whitewashed and made acceptable, that sometimes you can feel awkward going back into what is your culture. So that's what I mean by this white frame. Yoga isn't a traditionally white endeavor. It's actually a Hindu practice. There's fire ceremonies that are traditional indigenous practices, but as a spiritual coach, or as a coach that leans themselves towards consciousness and spirituality, there is an overwhelming amount of our white counterparts that have a louder voice and that have their voices amplified. And so it can sometimes feel like you have to fit into this frame so that people even start to listen to you.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That was a really, really perfect explanation of what like you hit the nail on
Thank
the
you.
head. And I love that you talked about like, you know, it's not something you should be ashamed of and feel guilty of. And most people, when we feel, when I feel triggered, or when someone else feels triggered, we take that as being a bad thing. Like, oh no, I want to avoid anger, avoid sadness, avoid feeling. When, you know, it's just a feeling of, it's an intensified feeling of discomfort, right? And
Yeah.
you know, that's where change happens.
Yes.
So yeah, like for me, right, I felt, I was telling you the other day, I grew up, my dad is white, my dad's German, and my mom is Puerto Rican. And I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So there was Hispanic people, Black people, all kinds of different people in my neighborhood. So I grew up in diversity, and my neighborhood was really poor. And it looked, and going around, and when I lived on Long Island, so like Long Island, New York, where, you know, one town could be really poor and the next town over is really rich. So, you know, like that, you know, growing up, I always met different people. So I was a part of different, you know, different friend groups and things like that. So when I went to hang out with a different crew, and I said where I was from, I had this shame of being from Central Islip, because, you know, it was looked down upon by many people, right? And it took me many years to own that and be like, I'm from CI, Central Islip. And you know, that was, and it had to do with like who I was around, who I was with. And I didn't think about that until recently. And, you know, I thought being, you know, growing up where I grew up, and my mom being Puerto Rican, you know, I grew up around different people. Like, I didn't think that racism applied to me. And also doing a lot of personal development, you know, overcoming challenges, overcoming being poor, you know, starting a business. I'm the first one in my family that started a business. You know, I felt like I did a lot of personal development, transformational work on myself, where like I you know, can do things, right? And then when I see people who like feel like they can't do something because of their circumstances, you know, it's hard for me to relate sometimes. And then, you know, thinking about racism and white privilege and my white privilege and how I look to people, because I look white. Like, I've been treated white my whole life. Like, some people always question me, like, oh, like, what's your background? Because your hair, you have a really cut, you have really curly hair. Like, you know, what are you mixed? I always get questioned, but I look white and I'm treated white. I never really had to deal with, you know, being treated differently for the color of my skin. And, you know, it wasn't until now, like now reading White Fragility, understanding where I have been racist, you know, even growing up where I grew up and noticing the difference in, you know, the town over, Islip and Central Islip, there was a huge difference, and they were predominantly white in Islip, where there was big houses and they grew up by the beach. So, so yeah, I guess where I'm getting at is I'm realizing now, like, how much, you know, I haven't owned, you know, my racism, and until now, and now I'm waking up, and I'm now I see how privileged I am and how privileged I've been. And it's a human issue. And it's, you know, I didn't know that people of color had to work even harder to be heard, seen, and recognized for who they are. You know, being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, like, I didn't know that you had to work that much harder to be who you are until now. and this is like, I'm really happy we're having this conversation. And I was telling you about the podcast I listened to with Tarana Burke. She founded the Me Too movement, and she did a podcast with Brene Brown, and she said something that really stuck with me. Oh no, Belinda, I think Belinda will come back on. So she said something that really stuck with me about vulnerability. And Tarana said, we can't afford to be vulnerable. And at first, like my, thinking is like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, you can. Everyone can, like that's where I went immediately. And then I really got it. Like, whoa, she means we can't afford to be vulnerable, like really express ourselves. Because if we do, we get suppressed, we get labeled, we get, Belinda, can you hear me? I think she's coming back on. Oh, I can't hear you. Hello? Try one more time. Are you on mute? You're connecting to audio now. Oh no. Hello? Technical difficulties. If you have any questions, I know this isn't live, but if you have any questions, feel free to put them to comment. Comment what you're liking so far about this conversation, what you want to know more of, what you liked, what you didn't like. While we wait for Belinda. Can I hear you now? You want to leave and come back on? I'm going to text Belinda. So Belinda is going to leave and come back on. So while we wait for Belinda, I would love to hear from you. What is vulnerability to you? And how comfortable are you with uncomfortable conversations? And what has this time in the world been like for you when it comes to being vulnerable and speaking your truth and speaking up? Yay, I can hear you.
Yay, you're back.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Sorry about that. It just lost sound. I think my headphones, I tried to disconnect my headphones and do it on speaker, and it just like wouldn't do it on speaker.
That's okay.
I'm doing everything now.
In the meantime, I was just asking people when like if they're listening to just comment any questions or thoughts they have. Chat box.
Yes.
So I think where I was talking about Tarana Burke and her podcast episode with Brene Brown, and at one point she said something like, "We can't afford to be vulnerable." And my like triggered brain message was like, "What do you mean? Yeah, you can. Anyone? Yeah, you can." Like, and it's like, "Yes, you can." Like personal development, like thought process. And then I had to like take a step back and realize like what she really meant, and what she really said was, we can't afford to be vulnerable, because when we are vulnerable, we get shit for it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I would completely concur with that. And I remember you telling me about that, and it really struck a really deep chord for me, because it's true. That's been my whole walk. That's been my friends who are in the personal development path and are women of color. That's been their whole walk, because this isn't just, a systemic thing. It's also a taught belief. It's a taught belief that bad things happen to you if you're vulnerable, if you open up. But then it's backed up by proof. Like, let's just look at, for example, Venus Williams, and how vilified she was by the media by having an angry outburst about an unfair umpire. And she was absolutely criticized online for being angry. We're not allowed to be angry. Our anger is overwhelming, it's threatening. And part of vulnerability is feeling all of your emotions, the whole spectrum of them, shadow and light. And we can't just step into the positivity without stepping into that darkness. That's where a lot of our creativity and our true self actually lives. So there's been this suppression that's been happening for Black women. I speak of Black women in particular. And also the other side is the fact that we've had to pick up the slack of the shadow masculine, which has left us out in the cold. And I speak in terms of, in this human construct, in this Black body, we have masculine energy, masculine expression of energy, and feminine expression of energy. I can only speak to my experience as a Black woman of feeling like I had to defend myself all on my own. And that is partly because there was an absence of healthy masculine energy that was protecting me. I wasn't hearing other Black men talk differently about Black women than everybody else was. There were all the assumptions that people made about Black women, about them being opinionated and loud and aggressive or ghetto or whatever it was happening as much in the Black community as it was everywhere else. So we also have to understand why Black women come across the way that they do. They are also in their shadow feminine because they've had to be. We've had to be both masculine and feminine. We've had to be both our protector, and trying to be still in our feminine energy doesn't work, because the masculine expression is the protector, the provider, the creator of safe space, the driver. And then we have the feminine energy of creativity, of intuition, of feel. And we weren't able to fully step into that because we were missing our masculine counterparts. So there's a lot of pain that we experience, even just in this human body, in this human construct, regardless of anything else, and that's why there's a lack of, I guess, self-expression or connectedness or even knowledge of that. Like my
No, you froze. Oh, Zoom. Hello. All right, Belinda will come back on. Conversation got too hot. If you're listening right now, don't give up. It's gonna get good. It's just getting better. She's gonna come back on. She got kicked off. Not sure what happened to Belinda. I'm hoping she comes back on so we can wrap up our conversation. So, I mean, going back to what Belinda said, what she was saying made me think of growing up, with a Puerto Rican mom I definitely, feel more connected to my Puerto Rican side of my family. I hung out, like I always was with my family. We had big parties together. And we were always very loud and expressive. And, there was some parts of that where I felt embarrassed by being really loud and expressive. And it really took a lot of growing up and ownership to start loving those parts of me. And that's why I started my company Vulnerable as Fuck, was because I had to feel more comfortable being super self-expressed. So I was saying while you were figuring out how to get back on, you froze.
I know, I froze for so long, and then you were frozen. I was like, did you hear anything?
No, we stopped, and then you got kicked off, and I was like, oh no! I was like, the conversation got too hot.
I know, right?
I heard you said a lot about like suppression and not being able to fully express yourself because you get, as a Black woman, you get shit for it. You get labeled like angry Black woman or like crazy, and that made me think of and I was just saying this out loud, that it made me think of my mom growing up and me and my big fear around being fully self-expressed around men, right, or around others, because my family is really, my mom is super like loud Puerto Rican stereotype, like just expressive. She'll flip out if you say something wrong, like, and I'm so used to that. And, I grew up, like, our family argued all the time. Like, that's how we communicated with each other. And I definitely think that's why I am doing the work that I'm doing, which is teaching people how to communicate confidently. Why I got trained in authentic relating communication is because I didn't know how to relate to other people, because I grew up, like, we argued all the time. That's how we spoke to each other. So that was normal for me. So I grew up, being afraid to own my anger, own my upset, because I was always so angry. And like, that's the way we like, my parents, we would call each other, and we said something that bothered us, we would hang up on each other. And that was normal. So it makes me think about, like, people say that about Puerto Rican women too, like, oh, like, crazy Puerto Rican, crazy lady, and I always never wanted to be that. I mean, like, I was there growing up, but then, like, when I started doing personal development, I started like being like, oh, I can't talk to people like that, like, and that suppressed me for a long time, actually. Like, oh, I can't be really vulnerable and expressive and angry, because I will get judged for being like, just like crazy lady, or like crazy Spanish lady, or like, like, I don't want to be that. So let me tone down. So I didn't think of that, actually, until it was only like maybe until a year ago, I started to, I did a lot of personal development that, like, kind of kept me, oh, let me be perfect and look perfect. And it wasn't until when I started Vulnerable as Fuck, and, started like to own my anger and own my sadness, where like, I feel totally okay flipping out if I want to flip out. And like, I won't curse someone out if they don't, like, I am still contained in a way that's appropriate, but I still, like, I'm feeling more comfortable feeling like I'm fucking angry. I'm feeling okay to say that.
And I feel like that's a big journey for Black women. I'll speak as my experience, because I know a lot that just live in their anger, and that's their expression. And anger, if you look at it from an inner child perspective, anger is all consuming and it's never ending. Anything that is unsatiable usually comes from an inner child wound, because as children we're completely insatiable. So that's why people have binge eating disorders. That's why people have addictions, of sex addiction, drug addiction, can't get enough of it, because we have that insatiability within us as kids. And if you flow your anger from your inner child lens, it can seem overwhelming. I probably had the opposite experience because my mum, I guess not wanting to be the stereotype, went the whole other way. And so she was very much a suppressor of energy. She was, you know, passive aggressive, and she would just give you the silent treatment. You'd have to figure out what you did wrong. And then I inherited those traits as I grew up because that's how I related. That's how at home we related. You just stayed silent until someone asked you what was wrong, and then you pouted for a little bit, and then you were over it. So that's how I learned to relate, to communicate, which is obviously also toxic. But it meant that a lot of my anger and sadness, like I first of all had to take off the, you know, the cover of all of the emotions, of showing my emotions without running them through an acceptability lens. Will this be an acceptable thing to show? No. Suppress it. Yes. Go ahead. So I had to remove that first before seeing the you know, the sheer amount of anger and sadness and pain that was hidden in all of my suppression. The suppression tells yourself that your emotions, your being is not acceptable to the world. It's an incredibly heavy burden to bear, to feel like who you are will inherently never be accepted. And that's what suppression does. That's why it's so destructive to the human soul and spirit. So a lot of the work that I do around bringing your authentic self and allowing yourself to be seen and accepted by a circle of people that love you in a safe space, that's why that's healing, because it allows you to uncover the creativity hidden behind that sadness, or the intuition hidden behind that anger. It allows you to piece together all the wonderful parts of what being human means. It means all of the mess. That's why we're so great. That's what makes us unique. It's the mess, not the perfection.
I love that you just said that. And that's a perfect segue to my last question for you. Not my last question, but my next question.
Yeah.
Why is it important right now, if you're someone listening and you're afraid of speaking up, and you're afraid of saying the wrong thing, you're afraid of being messy, you're afraid of sounding imperfect or saying the wrong thing, and afraid of making a mess, why is it important to have this kind of conversation, these kinds of conversations, to speak up? Maybe use your white privilege if you're white and you're listening. What tools could you give someone who is afraid of being imperfect or afraid of expressing themselves? Even if you are if you're not afraid of speaking up, but maybe you have another problem where you're afraid of, you know, fully expressing yourself.
Great question. I'd say the first thing, there's two big disservices that we do when we don't show up authentically. One is to ourselves. We have to understand that we have a limited time here on earth. We have 80, 90, maybe 100, if we're lucky, years to experience what life is like in this human body. And we signed up to this. We chose to live here. We chose to live in this time construct for a specific reason. And by hiding your self-expression, by hiding your true self and wasting time pandering to people who won't remember you when you're gone, because the majority of the people that we pander to is like society, or what will people think of me at work, or what will this happen? It's people that are very far away that won't remember you, that you're not the center of their universes, but somehow you've made them judge and executor on your life and your expression. And so you are doing a disservice to your human soul that signed up to be exactly who you are. It signed up to be the messy, the cries at weird things, or has a really weird laugh, or likes, you know, different things. It signed up to be that person. And so you're doing yourself a disservice to not be that person. And the worst thing that I would never wish on anyone is to wake up at 90 or 97 and look back and see that you've lived your whole life for other people. Those people are gone. And that's something that I've seen in my mum's life that really kind of started things ringing in my head, because when my grandma passed, mum was like, oh, so I did all of these things to make her happy and to make her proud, and now she's gone. Now what? You know? So like half of her life was, let me pander to this person. And sometimes it's subconscious. It's our job in the personal development field to help people that are going through that don't know what the limiting beliefs around the structure and the construct and the prison that they've created for themselves means, so that they can actually authentically express themselves. The second part is the disservice that you're doing to humanity. That kind of ties in together. By not being your full expression, you are preventing humanity from benefiting from what your soul is here to do. So you are preventing your whole purpose to come out. You're preventing the right friendships and relationships to flow your way, the right people that will be influenced by your fight or by your voice. You're preventing a whole new generation of, you know, young ones that we're bringing up into this world from learning from your example. So there's a huge disservice that you're doing not only to yourself, but to the human race as a whole, because at the end of the day, we are all one and we are all connected and we all contribute to each other's journey. So by suppressing yourself, you may be suppressing the gift that someone else really, really needs right now. Things as simple as your story. By suppressing your story, by denying certain parts of the painful parts of your story, you may be preventing someone else who's going through that right now, who could really do with a shoulder to cry on or some advice. So I'd say that that's the biggest thing about authentic self-expression. We are a gift not only to ourselves, but to the ones that watch us and the ones that follow us. And by not stepping into that full expression, you would be preventing the world from experiencing you in your entirety.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, you know, you and I both do what we do, talking about empathy, vulnerability, confidence, like, because we all have gifts. We all have gifts to contribute to the world, to bring to the world. And, you know, being vulnerable, being self-expressed is the gateway to, you know, authenticity, connection, innovation, change. So, yeah, so it's just like, it's so important to recognize that. And even if it's hard, I know it's hard to recognize that. It might feel hard to recognize that in some points of our lives. Like, you know, I'm doing a program right now where people find it hard to find out what their gifts are. Right. And I think the challenges that we faced as kids in our lives have been the catalyst for helping us do what we're doing now, or inspiration to, you know, be who we want to be. Like, if you told me 7 years ago that I would be teaching vulnerability and communication, well, I would have laughed in your face, because no way. I couldn't look in the eye. I could not even get up in front of a room. And and I couldn't even get off the phone without arguing with my mom.
But I talk about soul curriculums a lot in my programs, and how we all, it's almost like, okay, you're somewhere that is not currently earth, and you're this soul that's eternal, and you're kind of talking to divinity, and you're like, okay, well, I know that I'm this right now because I have perfect knowledge and perfect unity and compassion and empathy. So I know who I am, but I'm going to go to earth in this baby body that can't retain any of this information. So how can we just set things up so that at some point I can meet myself? And so I completely believe in that ability that we have had to kind of leave nuggets of wisdom if we choose to look at them. Like things like, I talk about my parents' divorce from really young and having to deal with issues of abandonment, or being in this Black body and having to deal with issues of suppression. There is no way that I would have found my full voice in a different construct. I would have just, because that's what humans do. That's what egos do. We get comfortable. And so I don't actually have anything against people who are just like, I just don't want to talk about the hard things because I'm comfortable. Because to be honest, if I was comfortable and I'd lived my entire life comfortable, I probably wouldn't want to change. But because I haven't, I have been pushed to change. I've been pushed to transform, and can now look at the nuggets and the little drops that were left in my path, the little clues into who I am now and who I will be, who I truly am deep inside. I can put them together and say, yes, it makes sense now that, you know, I have a gifting in that. I needed to have that ability to sense things. I needed to be empathic. And it came from a place of feeling like I was always in danger. So I needed to preempt things that happened so then I could make them okay. But now I can use it for good. I can use it for sensing energy in a room. I can use it for clearing energy in people. So we all have those nuggets. And as you said, like with your clients, you'll see that in your clients, the little gifts that they get are usually, sometimes they're survival mechanisms. There's things that we just had to learn and we just had to make use of and we take for granted. But actually it was our divinity that was giving us the hints, like, you're this person, use it, grow it, nurture it, and one day it will come to fruition.
Yeah, and it takes bravery, it takes courage, it takes fucking up, making you know, mistakes and failure.
Lots of that.
So if you're listening, just know that who you are is perfect, and it takes courage to share your gifts and to lean into the discomfort. So my last question for you is, what do you love about yourself?
That's a great question. I love my ability to completely focus on something until it's done. I would call it steadfastness. I think being headstrong is kind of a negative connotation, but it's something that I've had since I was a kid. Like, you couldn't distract me from whether it was I wanted food and I knew where the food was and I was going to find a way to get it. I was going to like build forts and build like to get to it. Or it was, you know, in the playground, I was like, we're playing tag or it, and I'm going to get that person. It doesn't matter what they do, or how it's translated in my business, that once I get an idea in my head and once it settles in my spirit, it's completely impossible to stop me. I'll just keep going. I'll fail. I'll get back up. I'll keep running towards that goal and hit my head against, you know, a wall, shake it off and get back up. And I love it, especially because it's a part of me that my parents and people around me, whether for good or bad, tried to suppress out of me, because it didn't make for a very disciplined kid, because I was always questioning things. I was always questioning adults and being like, yeah, but that's not right. And had really good points for it and wouldn't let it go. So it was hard to suppress. It was hard to suppress the energy, but also it was something that I took on when I became an adult. I took on and I suppressed a lot of myself. And I didn't allow myself to have that voice that just kind of broke through and was like, no, we're going to keep on this until it's different, until it shifts. There's no distracting me from this goal. So I'd say that's what I love the most about myself, my uncanny ability to continue, to endure, to keep going until what needs to get done gets done.
Amazing. I love that. I'm jealous of that superpower, because I'm like, ooh, glitter.
Exciting. Oh my God. No, I'm literally, even coming to Bali, my parents are like trying to distract me. I was like, no. They're like, yeah, but there's all these things and all of that. I was like, I know, I read the news too. I'll see ya. Like, waving from the plane. So it's not the easiest quality to have in a kid, but it's part of me. So I accept it completely.
Oh, I love that. Belinda, I love you so much. I love who you are. You're so powerful. You're brave. You're courageous. You're smart. And you're just a badass.
Thank you, girl. Love you too.
I just like love what you're doing, what you're creating, and who you've been. I'm happy that I met you here in Bali, and I can really, really just like see our friendship growing and blossoming. And I'm really happy to have a woman like you in my life, and I love what you're doing for women. Linda, she's working on creating wellness events and inviting facilitators, collaborators to host their events so that we can create a community here in Bali.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's happening. And she's doing that, and she's just been on fire doing shit and making things happen in the world. So do you have any programs or things that you want to offer, like something that you're launching soon? How can you share your gifts here?
Absolutely. So I have a free catalog on my website if you sign up to my newsletter, which is around bringing vision and dreams into goals and reality. So how do we create that shift from something just being it would be nice to one day travel the world and own my business, to how do I actually actionably make that happen and build it into a roadmap so people can get that free on my website on www.beholyliving.com. I also am launching the Hive Academy, which is going to be part incubator, part spiritual support and accountability group. And that's really going to be digging into the terms of conscious entrepreneurship. How do we create wealth? How do we create wealth that is remote, that is online, that allows you to travel and maybe not travel right now, but allows you at least to be free, to have freedom and variety as your values for your business, allows you to redesign your lifestyle as well as align your business with your purpose. So this is also for current entrepreneurs. Your current entrepreneur who is making a lot of money here is doing personal development on that side. How can we bring the two together? So as I said, it's going to be part that startup incubator, very strategic side of building a business, as well as the spiritual element as a wrapper around it. So that's going on. And I also have one-to-one coaching spots open. So for anyone who is a conscious entrepreneur and is looking to scale or grow and develop, or is someone that wants to go into that area, like how do I show myself more authentically, both in my workplace or in my side hustle, then you can find all my details there as well.
Amazing. Entrepreneurs, go find Belinda. Go find her. She's amazing. She has like her shit together, and she has everything that you could ask for. So I love it. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for being on here. I'm going to share your information. I'm going to share the link to your website. And this was really great.
I'm
conversation's ahead.
I know. We're going to keep talking.
All right. Well, I will talk to you soon, and I'm excited to share this with you guys.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Thank you, guys.
Bye.